sports history as the night they stormed the Palace. The fallout from the riot that ended the Pistons-Pacers game Friday at the Palace of Auburn Hills continues this morning. This morning's edition of Cold Pizza will have reports from Detroit with eyewitnesses including NHL star Chris Chelios. Fort Lauderdale, we have an interview with NBA legend Dr. J, Julius Erving. Indianapolis, where the Pacers will try to put back the pieces of their season. New York, where our panel of experts, led by former NBA star Charles Smith, will discuss what will happen next for players and fans. And from the First and 10 desk, where Woody Page and Skip Bayless will review the storming of the Palace. That's all coming up on this special edition of Cold Pizza.
Very good morning and welcome to Cold Pizza for Monday, November 22nd. Back inside the studio here, I'm Kit Hoover.
And I'm Bea Andrews. Jay Crawford, Skip Bayless, and Woody Page on shortly.
And of course, today we're going to have the latest on the fallout from Friday's riot at the Pacers-Pistons game. Sunday night security was heightened to playoff levels at the Palace as the Pistons resumed play minus suspended center Ben Wallace. Now the Pistons topped the Bobcats in double overtime, 117-116. And coming up, as you saw, we're going to have insight on this huge story from players to a former team executive, to a sports psychologist. We're also going to have the best of the NFL. And 4 more touchdown passes for Peyton Manning while his brother Eli gets his first. Our Cold Pizza analysts pick the Manning of the Week with our NFL award.
They certainly will. We're also going to look back at the weekend in college football, including the brawl between Clemson and South Carolina. And the player many think is the best high school hoopster in the nation, Greg Oden from Indianapolis, joins us, as well as legendary punk rocker Henry Rollins.
A little bit of everything, but first it's time for the day's news and views with First and 10.
Bea, thank you very much. Welcome to First and 10. And to say we've got a busy Monday morning ahead of us, guys, I think is a bit of an understatement. Good weekend for both?
I just spent the weekend trying to catch up with Skip. Let's move on.
And he's still
For those of you that understand that, if you watch Friday, you probably know what that means.
You should watch every day.
Woody Page and Skip Bayless are here for our look at the 10 biggest stories in the world of sports. And we have to start, of course, with the brawl in Detroit Friday night involving the Indiana Pacers, the Detroit Pistons, and their fans. No doubt you've seen the video. The trouble began late in the fourth quarter. Pacers were on their way to an easy win when Ron Artest fouls Ben Wallace. Wallace takes exception, shoves Artest. It appeared that things would end right there. But as Artest is lying on the scores table, watch as something is thrown from the stands, lands on Artest's chest. That enraged Ron Artest. Jumps into the stands, bolts after some of the fans.
The guy with the white cap is actually the one who threw the beer.
There is a lot. Absolutely right. The guy with the white cap actually lands a sucker punch on another one of the players. And then Artest towards one of the Pistons fans. Why that guy was on the court, it's yet to be determined. And then in comes Jermaine O'Neal. And the really scary part, when the guys are leaving the court, objects are thrown, beer, Coke, soda. It is a terribly ugly scene. Now, yesterday, Commissioner David Stern handed out the suspensions, and the Pacers were crushed. Ron Artest, done for the rest of the year. Steven Jackson, out for 30 games. Jermaine O'Neal will sit 25 games. Anthony Jackson, 5. Reggie Miller even suspended for a game. Meanwhile, here are the disciplined Pistons. Ben Wallace gets 6 games. Chauncey Billups, Derek Coleman, and Elvin Campbell all hit with 1-game suspensions. Ron Artest offered this reaction. In a statement, he said, quote, "I have total respect for all of the players who play the game, and I respect David Stern, but I don't think he has been fair with me in this situation," end quote. Woody, these very stiff punishments, do they fit the crime?
Well, you guys know about the Artest, and I sound almost like a broken record, but I finally was proven correctly. I told you he needed psychological help. He does have psychological problems. If this doesn't prove it, I don't know what will. Does the fine fit the punishment? Here's what I would have done. I would have suspended him indefinitely while he got psychological treatment, while he sat down with doctors, while he maybe even committed himself to a hospital, and have him reevaluated from time to time. And when the doctors and when the team and when the league felt like it was appropriate for him to come back, that's the way it should have been done. Instead, you suspend him for a year, he'll go off and he'll deal with his rap records, he'll lay on the beach, he will not get the kind of psychological help he needs. Remember Billy Martin? I talked to you about Jimmy Pearsall. Billy Martin, I think everybody knows, he was a basket case. Let's face it, guys, there was a guy that needed help and didn't get it. Artest is a guy that is reaching out. He's trying to say to people, please help me. Please help me. Instead, they suspend him for a year. That will not do any good. What you do is you make him go to psychiatrists.
But by his standards, what he did when he went into the stands was not nearly severe enough to merit a whole year's suspension. I don't care what you say, and I agree with all your point. I hope he did use this time to get help. But this was the commissioner sending an early message before the appeals process starts that I'm going to regain control of my game.
If it's anyone other than Ron Artest,
absolutely
is it a season?
not. I sat in Wrigley Field just 5 years ago, and I watched 7 Los Angeles Dodgers pile into the stands after Chad Kruger's hat, which had been plucked off his head in the bullpen, and they engaged in a haymaker throwing contest with 5 or 6 fans that would have shocked everyone in this room and everybody watching way more than what you saw from Artest. By his standards, Woody, I thought he was restrained once he figured out that was the wrong kid. That kid didn't throw the
Woody
beer.
told us what he would do if he were commissioner. He'd make sure that Artest get help. What would your suspension be? What's fair in this case?
30 games for Artest.
30 games?
But I totally agree now.
But how does that deal with his problem?
It doesn't. That's a whole other issue, Woody.
Skip, over the past 3 years, I think he's been suspended about 88 games. I'm saying about.
This
Yes,
is his
exactly
7th suspension.
88 games. And if you include the 73, and he's again proving over and over again that he's a man who's troubled.
I
and
agree.
I don't know any other way to put it. He needs Barrett Robbins. I go back to him in the Super Bowl. It got completely out of hand. That's what we saw here. Here is a man that's suffering from anti-depression. He needs, and I'm not a doctor, but he needs help. And by just saying we're suspending you without giving him help, gosh,
but the reason he got a year's suspension wasn't because of Friday night. It was because of 3 years of a
Yeah, and David Stern even said he took into consideration the fact that he had been suspended 6 times previously. You can't talk about this issue without talking about the fans and the responsibility that they share. The situation escalated when Ron Artest was hit by the object from the stands. That can't be ignored. His reaction certainly wasn't good, but the fans certainly seemed willing to get involved. Jermaine O'Neal's punch happened on the court, which begs the question, what was the fan doing on the court in the first place? David Stern spoke about the fans' conduct and how the league will deal with it.
We must redefine the boundaries of acceptable conduct for fans attending our games and resolve to permanently exclude those who overstep those bounds. Quite simply, participants in and around the court must be assured complete protection from unacceptable fan behavior.
All right. In theory, it sounds like an easy thing to do. How do you, A, identify these fans? How do you deal with them? The commissioner can't suspend them. What do you think of his comment?
Let's talk about what happened that was really shocking here, Woodrow, and that was what happened on the court after what happened in the stands. That's what knocked me out of my chair. Check this out. Artest engaging with this fan, and then another fan grabs him around his legs, and then here comes Jermaine O'Neal flying headlong in, almost a Kermit Washington-style punch of this guy. And if they said one fan went to the hospital, it must have been with this guy. But we have seen in baseball and other sports where fans have gone on the field. We had the White Sox incident where 2 wackos ran after and jumped on the first base coach, Tom Gamboa, at White Sox Park. And baseball players have said, from henceforth, if you cross the white line, you are fair game, meaning you're going to get hurt. Those fans, those 2 guys, crossed the line. They were in the court of play. I think they're fair game, and that's why, again, too harsh for Jermaine O'Neal. He got 25 games for throwing a punch in defense of Ron Artest, who had been challenged by the other guy's buddy head-to-head and throwing punches at him. So why would he get suspended for defending Artest against a guy? God forbid, what if he'd had a gun? What if he'd had a knife? That didn't happen, but it will at some point.
Fan is short for fanatic, and these are not even fanatics, they're lunatics. You mix young men and alcohol, and you have a volatile problem. We see it after teams win championships. We've seen it in baseball, as you pointed out, seen it in hockey. I wrote about the fans in St. Louis a couple of years ago pouring beer and boxes and everything else all over the head of a goaltender for the Avalanche that was rather well known, Patrick Waugh, after he won a big game. I saw it in Denver, and I wrote about the fact that the fans were throwing those plastic beer bottles and hitting kids when they were trying to hit the opposing players on the ice. Let me point specifically. Detroit has a history of this, but other cities do. But in Detroit, you can buy one of those tickets where those guys were sitting for $365. It takes to get that money. Maybe their companies give it to them. Maybe they save up the money. Maybe they just came down and sat on $365. You know what you get with that? Unlimited drinking. You get as much beer and wine as you want to. 90 minutes before the game, you can go to a club room and drink your ass off, forgive me. Then you can sit in the stands and you can drink and drink and drink. What in the world is that all about?
Well,
That's what's going to end up
So how
happening.
much responsibility do the Pistons and their management take in this?
Well, it shows about sports. That is true in all of sports. If you want to just fill up people with wine and alcohol and beer and mixed drinks, that's what you're going to get. There's got to be some controls, and it's got to be more than we're going to stop beer sales at the end of the 7th inning or at the end of the second period.
All right, much more on that in just a bit. First, we want to talk about the Pacers and their future. Slim roster now. They got a slight glimpse of how tough things will be Saturday night when they face the Orlando Magic. Ron Artest's locker emptied out, much like the Pacers bench. Fourth quarter, Stevie Francis of Orlando makes the steal. And he's going the other way. This makes it 77-73, Orlando with a 4-point lead. Next play, Fred Jones drives. He's going to bank it in. Pacers down by a minute left. Francis drives again, kicks it out to Grant Hill. Hill's jump shot from the wing gives the Magic a 5-point lead. Fred Jones doing everything he can to try to keep the Pacers in it. Under 10 seconds to go. Jones gets off a long three-pointer. He's going to nail it, and the Pacers are down by 1. He'd get one more shot. This one would have tied the game. Magic come up with the win. 86-83 is the final. Meanwhile, last night in Detroit, extra security was in place at the Palace of Auburn Hills as the Pistons were playing the expansion Charlotte Bobcats. The Pistons played the game with just 9 players dressed. It goes to double overtime when Tayshaun Prince's dunk with 16 seconds left settled the deal. Pistons win it, 117-116 in double overtime over the Bobcats. But back to the Pacers now, who are 0-1 since the fight. After the suspensions were handed down, Pacers co-owner Herb Simon released this statement. He said, "While we do not condone some of the actions of the players involved, we do consider the actions taken Sunday by the National Basketball Association to be unprecedented and inappropriate based on the circumstances." He went on to say, "We believe that there was a rush to judgment and not enough opportunity for all sides to be heard. We will vigorously support our players in any available appeal process in order to have these penalties reviewed and reduced." Woody, this was a team that looked like a real contender in the East until this. Do they have any chance at all of challenging?
Absolutely not. They're going to be missing for 25 games minimum, 62.5 points and 21 rebounds. How are you going to replace that when you have on your bench a vice presidential candidate? John Edwards. He is their bench right now. They're playing Gill, a couple of guys named Jones, David Harrison, who I saw in Colorado as a rookie center. This is a team that is in total disarray that's going to disappear over the next 25 to 30 games, and you can't consider them a serious contender when they won't have probably one of their 2 best players, arguably their best, in Ron Artest, not playing the rest of the season.
Yeah, but again, are you talking about not making the playoffs? Because they will still make the playoffs. The problem is, if there's no Ron Artest, and I'm still not sure that's going to stand up in appeals court, but if he is, there is no way they advance in the playoffs, because this guy, and what was sad, it got lost in the shuffle, they look like the best team in the East on Friday night. Artest scored 24, which is a game high. Yeah. He is Defensive Player of the Year reigning, and there's no way they can beat Detroit or Miami in the playoffs without Ron Artest.
You're right. In a matter of minutes, they went from beating the defending champs on their home floor, up by 15 late, to a team decimated now by suspensions, and it will be a long run for the Indiana Pacers. Quickly, one word: do they have any chance at all getting these appeals reduced?
Yes, absolutely.
I don't know.
Don't know. All right. That'll do it for First Down. Don't stray, though. We're back with much more on the brawl in just a little bit. Up next, though, we'll talk to two people, including Chris Chelios, who were at the game, and you won't believe what Chelios had to do once the fighting started. We'll ask him about that. Oh, and yesterday was an NFL Sunday. And we promised to look around the league, and we'll hand out our weekly NFL awards. Edgerrin James, what an effort for him. Kind of lost in the big day by Peyton Manning. And we want to know, do you feel safe at sporting events? We'll ask a former NBA executive and Indiana Pacers beat writer that question. So much to do straight ahead on Cold Pizza.
Cold Pizza, brought to you by Sears. What are you wishing for? You'll find it here. Sears, good life, great price. Nintendo, who are you? And Wendy's Wild Mountain Chicken and Bacon Cheeseburger. It's better here.
Yeah, I was in shock. I couldn't, as a player, and as a, a person that it was kind of shocking that it had to go that way because, I really didn't think that he initiated everything. Don't go in the stands, I guess. You just try to keep your cool as best way you can.
Hello, Chris. This is Jay in New York. Chris and Drew, can you guys hear me?
You're fine, Jay.
Yeah. Chris, kind of wild there on Friday night, huh, guys?
Yeah, that's about as chaotic as it gets in a short time. Yeah, it was nuts.
Went to an NBA game and a hockey game broke out.
Yeah, I've heard that one a couple times.
I tried to, but it fell on the floor. How do you see that far?
We'll be
the camera sees all.
I cover the hole in my jeans now.
Chris, we looked for you in video. We couldn't find you, man.
No, I was hiding underneath the chairs.
Yeah?
No, I was furthest away as you could be on the floor. A good view of everything. It's just far enough away, thank God, that we didn't get involved in anything.
Hey, Chris, were you in the, is your seat a VIP seat?
No, actually, I was with Kid Rock. I think you guys heard that. He just got floor seats this year, so we're exactly kitty corner from the Pacers bench. So.
Oh, okay, okay.
The Palace people, the security guards, give us the table that's right behind the visiting team's bench. So thank God that didn't happen.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, I was in shock. I couldn't, as a player, and as a, a person that I compete against all the time. It was kind of shocking that it had to go that way because, I really didn't think that he initiated everything. Don't go in the stands, I guess. Just try to keep your cool as best way you can.
And that was LeBron James reacting to the Pacers' suspension last night after a 10-point loss to the New York Knicks. As for Detroit, June's peaceful celebration of its NBA title helped the city live down the rioting that followed the Tigers' 1984 World Series win. Now the storming of the Palace seems to reinforce the Motor City's negative image. With us now from Troy, Michigan, two eyewitnesses to Friday's madness. He was sitting courtside at the Palace with Kid Rock, veteran NHL defenseman Chris Chelios. Chris, good morning to you. Also with us, he was in press row, Detroit Free Press sports columnist Drew Sharp. Drew, thanks for joining us as well. Chris, tell us where you were when the fight started.
Pretty much kitty corner from the Pacers bench in the far end, so actually a pretty safe place to be and get a look at what was going on from right in the beginning when Artis fouled Ben Wallace, right till the end where the guys were walking out. So it was scary for the people that were involved in it and around where the players were going into the crowd. It was a heck of a scene to watch this live. I've never been to a sporting event where something like that's broke loose like that and gotten so out of control with the athletes and the fans.
And that's saying something, of course, being in the NHL as long as you have. I'm sure you've seen your share of scary scenes involving fights in the NHL. What was the crowd's mood before the fight?
You know, obviously the Pistons were getting blown out. I think they were down by 14, so they were frustrated. And, you know, there's a lot of trash talking going on, especially when you're sitting on the court. You see how the fans can really get in the guy's ear, you know, one of the players' ears on the court. And, you know, it was going on for most of the game. You know, even players arguing during the game with fans, you know, while the game's going on. So it's, you know, I don't sit too often on the floor, and it's something to see that happen. And, you know, it's amazing to see the players give the fans the time of day, but, I mean, you can only take so much before you give it back to them, and I guess that was the case. And, you know, it just escalated, and I think that something must have been happening during the game for that fan to end up on the court and get in that player's face.
Drew, your seat on press row, where were you when it started in regards to the fight, and were you on that side of the court or the opposite side?
Well, fortunately, I was far, far removed from all the action. It was 45 seconds left. You know, a lot of the reporters are heading out to the press room at the time. So, you know, unfortunately, fortunately for me, you know, Chris had a better look at it. Unfortunately, you know, being at the point of attack, what was going on. But clearly, it was a sickening, ugly episode. And as someone who was born and raised in the city of Detroit, watching this whole thing unfold, I was a Detroiter after watching that whole episode unfold.
Drew, you've been a veteran sports reporter. You've seen a lot through the years. Where does this rank in terms of just utter shock?
It's the worst. It's the worst. I was covering the '84 World Series. I was outside of Tiger Stadium when that episode gained such a national infamy. And I thought it was overblown from the national media standpoint. But you know what? I can't defend the actions of those idiotic fans who felt that, you know, their ticket entitled them to express themselves more than just cheering or booing. Chris is absolutely right. At some point, something has to be done to properly police the fans and make them as accountable as the players.
What? What has to be done? How do you fix it?
You know what? Criminal charges. What I want to see the Oakland County prosecutors have enough of a spine to go after the fans who were identified in the video. And you know what? Prosecute them, and don't just take away their season tickets. That's a slap on the wrist. Throw them in jail. Give them 30 days of jail time. Give them a criminal record that's going to follow them the rest of their lives. And maybe then a message will be sent to the fans, just like a message was sent to the players. There are boundaries that you do not cross, regardless of whether you're a fan or a player.
Very good. Chris, you were with Kid Rock. What was his reaction when all this was breaking out?
Well, the initial was let's get in there, but I don't think he was too serious.
Did you have to hold Kid Rock back?
No, I just say, listen, you stay right here. This is something. I mean, you got to watch this. This is going to get out of hand, and it did. He's got more of an interest in it, obviously, being a Detroit native, and he's got some reaction was to get over there and help someone. But like I see watching, like everybody said now, the past 3-4 days, that's one of the most amazing you're ever going to see in sports. So when you're there seeing it live, it was crazy. Chairs flying, the punches being thrown. You don't expect anything like that to happen, and you got to be thankful no kids got involved, and most of the kids had already left the game. I mean, a chair hitting a kid, who knows what could have happened. Right. And like I said, I think the Palace security guys, the whole staff did an unbelievable job in at least containing it and not letting it escalate, because there was people standing by us, you know, as far away on the court as you could be, trying to get across the court, and they couldn't get over there. And you know, I give them credit. It was underneath the bleachers. I think you were down there, Drew, underneath. Yeah. And there was families and friends and members of the team that were, you know, trying to get each other also. And like I said, it could have gotten way worse. And I think when everybody sits back and looks at it, that, like you said, the fans have to be penalized for throwing stuff, for being on the court. And now it's got to be a stiffer penalty, because it can't be tolerated. And ultimately, that's what instigated this whole thing, was someone throwing, you know, something at one of the players.
And Chris, the fact that the players actually went into the stands, that really is one of the most debated issues on the entire incident. Let me ask you, as a player, as a pro athlete, and hockey players have to deal with this as much as anyone, it's one thing to get the verbal abuse. When fans start throwing things, they certainly don't have a license to do that, but does anything excuse a player from going into the stands and doing what we saw Friday night?
No, no, I mean, that's unacceptable. And the fact that there was no one in the crowd left, it was easy access for him to get up there and go after the guy that threw it or the guy that he thought. There's no excuse for that, but as for his teammates, you know, his teammates got suspended 25 and 30 games, you know, trying to go in his defense to help him. And I'd be lying to you if I said one of my teammates was up there and if I thought he was in trouble. I mean, you look at Monica Seles getting stabbed on a tennis court by some crazed fan. You don't know what's going to happen up there, and especially the guys that were on the court. You hate to say it, but it's happened in Europe where people have gotten killed, you know, trampled, or, you know, guns, knives. So you don't overreact. It's something that's really serious, and something bad can happen. So, but like you said, as far as going in the crowd, no, that's unacceptable, and he's been penalized for that and been suspended for the rest of the year. And I think that's a very good call. But as for his teammates coming in his defense, you know, I think they should appeal those, and, you know, especially O'Neal on the court trying to help out defense. You know, he hit a guy, but those two guys were on the court and they were getting into it with Artis.
All right, Chris Chelios, Drew Sharp from nearby Detroit, Michigan this morning. Thank you very much, guys. We appreciate it. We'll have much more this morning on Friday night's basketball, including an interview with in about 7 minutes with one of the NBA's all-time greats, Hall of Famer Dr. J. Julius Erving. And don't forget, we want to know what you think. Our Cold Pizza poll is up at www.coldpizza.tv. Right now it's 26 minutes past the hour, time for our weekly NFL awards, and for that, I'll send it to Thea Andrews.
Dan Marino's single-season mark of 48 touchdown passes is well within reach of Peyton Manning. With 4 more TD passes in Sunday's easy win over the Bears, the Colts quarterback has 35 with 6 games left to play. His younger brother Eli threw his first touchdown pass, but his Giants lost 14-10 against the Falcons. To hand out our weekly NFL awards, we bring in 2 of our Cold Pizza analysts, Newsday football call and Howard Cross. Not a lot of guys talking about football, or girls talking about football.
What are we doing here?
Around the water cooler this morning, but we'll try to do our part, all right?
All right.
So, Howard, I'll start with you. Who is your Manning of the week?
Can I take them both? Because these guys,
you know,
in their own way. All right, well, I'll take Peyton. I mean, Peyton is just on fire. He's playing football like no quarterback we've seen in quite some time. Four touchdowns yesterday. He's going to break Dan Marino's record if he stays healthy. But Eli did a good job. You know, he came away with a 45.1 rating, which is brutal by NFL standards. But he was good. And I think Giant fans who were at that game, I did see the game, he showed that this guy is going to be a good quarterback for a long time to come.
He's young. He looks like such a baby, but he has poise.
He does have poise. He can barely shave. He barely needs to shave. But he can read defenses and really do a good job.
What about player of the week? I'll start with you, Howard.
I think Edgerrin James in the great Peyton Manning's 4 touchdowns, catching Dan Marino's record. You lose out on Edgerrin James running for over 200 yards, a touchdown. He had a great day, and you kind of miss out on that because Peyton Manning is such a big star. He's having such a great season.
Sure, yeah. He stole a bit of the spotlight from him, though. What do you think, Howard, player of the week?
You know, I like James. I'm going to go defense. James Farrior from the Steelers. The Steelers' defense has been such an unsung part of this whole 9-1 season. Ben Roethlisberger has gotten all the pub. This interception return for a touchdown here is just one of many plays that James Farrior has made this year. He is right now the defensive player of the year, and that includes Ray Lewis. He's having a terrific year.
Okay, what about your, let's call it the stubbed toe player of the week award, Howard, this week?
Actually, that's mine. I'm going to take that one. Stubbed toe goes to Phil Dawson, the Browns kicker, who had 27 straight field goals coming into the game against the Jets yesterday, and he missed 2 in a 3-point game.
Wide right.
Wide right both times. Blew the game. Butch Davis now 3-7 on the hot seat even more.
You got to love his comment after, though. This proves that I'm not perfect. In case anyone was confused, now we know.
Let me overstate the obvious.
He's not perfect. Howard, what about your unsung player of the week?
My unsung player of the week is Nick Goins for the Carolina Panthers. He just had a great game, 121 yards, 3 touchdowns. He hasn't scored a touchdown in 3 years. He's a third-string running back. Deshaun Foster's out. Davis is out. They bring him in. He just does a great job for him.
Okay, tonight's matchup is between the New England Patriots and the Kansas City Chiefs. Let's talk about Snickers' hungriest player candidates. Start with you, Bob.
I'm going to go with Corey Dillon, the running back. Great matchup against the Chiefs. Terrible run defense. I think Corey Dillon has a big game for the Patriots.
All right, Howard?
I think that's what coaches always think they're going to go to thing, but they're not. They're going to go with Tom Brady. We're going to put it in the air. We're going to have him score a lot of touchdowns.
They might need to, because the Chiefs might score on them.
Well, that's going out on a limb, picking Tom Brady.
Yeah.
You really thought about that 1 hour. Thanks, you guys. We can go back to talking about basketball now. To cast your vote for the Snickers hungriest player in the Monday night game between the Patriots and the Chiefs, and in the process possibly win a trip to the Super Bowl, go to Snickers.com and catch the game on ABC at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Up next, the doctor's in. We hoop it up with Dr. J, Julius Irving, and we'll get his take on the storming of the palace. You're watching Cold Pizza.
The Snickers Hungriest Player Preview, brought to you by Snickers. Snickers handles the hunger of the NFL.
I think that a large audience would be kind of turned off, a huge American audience. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Sports sellout. That was the bad taste part. I bet she was.
Guys, give me one-on-one in the living room.
How he felt about it. You got any players who just go?
Mid-30.
Where am I?
Thank you.
Where you been?
I've been chilling, boo.
Why you got to be away?
Well, you know.
Yeah, sure. Julius, this is Jay Crawford in New York. Can you hear me?
Hey, Jay, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Good morning to you.
Good. Good morning to you.
How are things? Doing okay?
Yeah, we're doing fine. Thank you.
Boy, how about that thing Friday night? Kind of ugly, huh?
Yeah, more than kinda. More than kinda. It was bad. I haven't seen anything like that in this country. I usually see those highlights from South America, England, Europe, you know.
Yeah.
Crazy soccer matches when they get out of control.
Yeah, you're
Maybe
right.
the running of the Bulls in Spain.
It looked a little like the running of the Bulls.
You don't see it here too often.
Yeah, you're right, man. It's be along with you in just a minute.
Okay.
Basketball is still reeling from the storming of the palace. Friday night's images are, of course, a far cry from the electrifying sight of our next guest soaring to new heights and taking the game right along with them. With us this morning from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, a Hall of Famer, the legendary Julius Irving. Julius, good morning to you.
Good morning, Jay.
Your initial reaction to Friday's brawl at the Pistons-Pacers game, Julius?
Initial reaction was, this is ugly. It pains me in my heart. I'm sitting here and I'm watching. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. I could not, and then it kept going on and on and on. Left hook, right hook, chair come flying in. I'm like, what the heck is going on? You know, because I didn't watch the game. I mean, I just saw the replays, and it was the most frightening thing that I've ever seen in my sport.
Julius, there is certainly a lot of blame to go around here. How do you assign the blame?
Well, I look at the fans, and I look at security, and then I look at the players. And
in that
speak
order?
from the players for, yeah, that's what I saw. Now, in terms of more information coming out, how the whole thing plays out, you know, maybe around a little bit. But if I'm a player and I'm a former player and I've been in management, you know, I need to control my product, and considering the enormity of the risk associated on behalf of the players and for the league, I think the commissioner acted wisely and justly in terms of coming down with all-time high fines and suspensions.
Do you feel that these suspensions have any chance at all of being overturned, appealed? How successful will these appeal attempts be?
I don't think they're going to be very successful. You know, I think everybody's really sick over this situation. I think the appeals will probably be formality. You know, they were decided over a 48-hour period, and I think they were probably unanimously decided by the powers that be, and it would be undermining the commissioner's authority if there was a reversal of any of those fines or suspensions.
Julius, you've been rumored to be a coaching candidate on a handful of occasions, but we haven't seen you on the bench yet. Why aren't you coaching?
Never been rumored to be a coaching candidate, never applied, never interviewed, and don't have any interest in coaching. That's probably why you haven't seen me coach.
No interest at all to be a coach, huh?
No interest at all. You know, I've been out of basketball since 1987, done a lot of things in that time, continue to do a lot of things entrepreneurial. My association with basketball now is through licensing relationships and through my relationship with Converse Inc., which has been a 30-plus year relationship. And that keeps me close to the game, keeps me interested in watching the rising, as well as checking on the old heads every now and then, those 28, 29-year-olds who are considered to be the major veterans in the league, the older guys, and making myself available to assist either individual franchises or collectively if the league asks me to do different things. So, no, I've never been interested in coaching. I don't know where you got that from.
Well, we thought we'd heard your name mentioned a time or two with coaching vacancies. Apparently not, and you have no interest, so we clear that up. Julius Erving, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Okay, good talking to you. Have a great day up there.
And you too. Our thanks to Julius, who is one of only 3 players to score more than 30,000 points in his pro basketball career. Remember, we want to hear what you think about the storming of the Palace. Log on to coldpizza.tv and tell us. We'll pass it along. Now let's send it over to Thea Andrews with a look at this morning's news headlines. Thea?
Thank you, Jay. The 2004 presidential race is over, but the 2008 race may have already begun, with Vice President Dick Cheney declaring he's not a candidate to succeed President Bush. Arizona Senator John McCain says he might be. McCain, who will be 72 for the next run, told Meet the Press on Sunday there will be plenty of time to decide. New York Senator Hillary Clinton is now a rival to Famous Amos. The cafe at President Clinton's new presidential library will carry chocolate chip cookies made from the same recipe Clinton gave out after a 1992 interview. The recipe came about after the former First Lady once said of her political career, "I suppose I could have stayed home and baked cookies." The Library Cafe opens today. And over at the box office, Nicolas Cage barely knocked off a cartoon sponge. Cage's new movie National Treasure was panned by film critics, but still grabbed the top spot, earning more than $35 million. The SpongeBob SquarePants movie debuted in 2nd place. After 2 weeks at #1, The Incredibles slipped to 3rd, followed by The Polar Express and Bridget Jones' The Edge of Reason. Those are the morning's news headlines. Now, move over Roger Ebert.
Here's the bottom line. Everyone hates a critic, but everyone is a critic, so why not me? I'm no expert on film. I'm no columnist. I'm a guy who likes a good movie.
There he is. Henry Rollins is branching out, becoming a movie critic. In the 80s, he was the front man of the punk rock band Black Flag, then leader of the Rollins Band. He's authored numerous books and has acted in several movies, including Bad Boys 2 and Heat, my favorite. Now, instead of acting in them, he'll be reviewing them in Henry's Film Corner that's going to air on the Independent Film Channel. Welcome to Cold Pizza this morning, Henry Hot Rollins. Henry, good morning.
Oh, how do you do?
We were reading there in the intro, quite a diverse career. Now, movie critic. How did this come about?
I forget how many months ago, several months ago, a group of young guys, Swift River Productions, started battering my manager with phone calls. We think Henry should be a wise guy film critic.
Why do they think you'd be a good movie critic?
Because I have zero fear of saying what I think, because Thomas Jefferson told me it was cool. And so they said, we think Henry should review film, and we'd like to form the show around him and go out there and pitch it. And so I met with them and admired their energy and do have an opinion on film. I like a good film, as anyone does. And I live in Hollywood, and I've done a few films, and I hate some of the stuff that comes out and wait for the great ones. And so I said...
What's some of the stuff that you hate out there?
I just hate the over-budgeted films that are completely unbelievable. And they're generated. That's fun to take that kind of ride. But just the 60-year-old man with a 20-year-old girlfriend and just all these unbelievably gross scenarios. those feel-good films. I can't stand them.
What are some that you like?
Something that came out recently that I like. Haven't been to the movie theater in a while. Actually, Wes Anderson has a new film coming out called Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, starring Bill Murray. And
love Bill Murray.
And I love Bill Murray as well. And that film, I'm a huge Wes Anderson fan. He did Rushmore and the Royal Tenenbaums. And this is a great movie, and I reviewed it for the show coming up. Sean Penn has a film called The Assassination of Richard Nixon. I'm a huge Sean Penn fan, and that film is really heavy. And those are two films that I think are enormous. They're great. I don't know how well they'll do, but that doesn't matter to me. I just want to see something that I walk out of the theater wanting to see again, or a character that moved me. And I find myself somewhat unmoved by a lot of the bigger budget films.
Why do you think that is?
I think they try and please so many people at once, they end up, well, they don't please me. I think sometimes movies seem to be made around the strip mall they're going to be shown in. But they almost go, well, look, that movie would fit in that obscure building right over there. And those mulleted people will like it. And I just, well, obviously I have an opinion there. So
that's what's going to make this show good, is your opinion. And are you going to have a rating system? What's your rating system?
I have a rating system, of course. It's just the basic 1 to 5 stars. Something like Dr. Strangelove or The Godfather would get 5 stars. On the Waterfront, Streetcar Named Desire, 5 stars. And then there's films that get 1 star. They shouldn't have been made. Like a new version of Psycho. Please don't do that. Hitchcock
don't ruin it.
Well, Hitchcock got to rehash it unless you have utterly no vision and no courage to break into new areas of film and shots like they do in places like Hong Kong, where you're seeing camera angles and things being done that are surprising and unique and fantastic.
Now, what's going on with you musically these days?
This year, I did no music, a lot of TV, movie, radio, and other stuff.
What do your music fans think of that when you take a year off?
I'm sure I could stop doing music right now and no one would really notice. I'm extremely small of fame, which gives me a lot of latitude, a lot of room to move. When you're obscure and on the fringes of entertainment,
I'm not buying that. You can say that, but I'm not buying that.
No, I can be like a entertainment's ninja. You never know I'm here. I'm in, I'm out.
You're being modest. I'm not. Your fans are fanatical.
Well, those who appreciate me, yes, they do. Those who don't, they make their presence known as well.
I know you. In May, you went to Iraq. Any plans to return?
Yeah, well, I was in Iraq and Kuwait for the USO in May of this year, and I like the troops very much. I'm one of their big fans. They are our best Americans, our enlisted men and women. Yes, I asked to go back to Iraq. As soon as I left, I said, when can I go back to Baghdad? And they said, you have to wait a year till more troops rotate out. And so after Kuwait and Iraq, I went to Honduras for the USO. I have another trip planned in December, although they haven't exactly told me where I'm going, but they told me I'm going in December.
Nice.
They like to keep it to the last minute. Last year I was in Kyrgyzstan and Qatar and Afghanistan for the USO. It'll be 4 tours in 1 year.
Well, you have to come back and tell us about it. I'm sure the troops appreciate you doing that. And Henry,
Sure.
best of luck with your new show. Should be interesting.
At least.
You always break it down honestly. Henry's Film Corner premieres Saturday at 9 Pacific on the Independent Film Channel. Coming up, you couldn't turn on the TV this week without seeing the basketball brawl. Our Terrell Owens chatting with a woman in a towel. Was it too much? Well, we'll discuss that topic coming up on this week's Couch Potato.
Couch Potato
Yes,
Preview.
darling. Sure, is that Cammie Clark? Is he there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Cammie, how's it going?
Terrific. I'm a little sleepy, but...
You are, oh, you'll be woken up the minute the camera gets on you.
I'm sorry?
The minute the camera gets on you, you'll perk right up, I know.
Oh, yeah, I will.
You ready to talk racing?
I am.
Good stuff.
It was amazing, yeah.
Oh, I know. I wish I'd seen it. I didn't see it this weekend, but we're gonna go to another story first, and then we're gonna be over to you, Cammie.
Okay. And how do you pronounce your name?
Thea.
Oh, great, thanks.
Thea, but you pronounce it Thea.
For 24 hours, they've watched the basketball fiasco on TV. That's all they've watched. I mean, that's on 24 hours a day. Every major news right now going on in sports. And again, I think last night was an example of what happened. Oh yeah, it's disgusting. It was the very last thing said coming out of the dressing room by me.
Listen to him. I just saw him, whatever he said.
No, it was interesting.
Sound check, Eric. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Couch Potato Preview is brought to you by DirecTV. Movies, music, and exclusive sports from the leader in digital satellite entertainment.
For 24 hours, they've watched that basketball fiasco on TV. That's all they've watched. I mean, that's on 24 hours a day. Every major news program, that thing was covered, and they've sat there and watched it. There's an era right now going on in sports, and again, I think last night was an example of what happened. Oh yeah, it's disgusting. It was the very last thing said coming out of the dressing room by me.
Well, if you're anywhere near a television this week, you couldn't miss it. TV showed it over and over again. Clemson coach Tommy Bowden all the storming of the Palace, and that's why a day later his team was involved in an ugly brawl with South Carolina. But NBA Commissioner David Stern fired back at the Clemson coach. So was Bowden right, or is it safe to turn on the TV yet? The answers we turn to Cold Pizza contributor and TV Guide's Eric Bowden. Eric, good morning.
How you doing?
So what, you could not turn on any channel without seeing this. Who do you think had the best coverage?
Well, I mean, not to be the hometown favorite, but, I turned to ESPN. I think that's where a lot of sports fans turn to it. I didn't see it happen live, and I really want to know what happened, why it happened. That's where I went there. But like we said, this thing was everywhere. You could turn on any network you wanted and see what they were doing. I mean, Saturday Night Live, you could see and get a take on it there if you missed it during the day Saturday.
Yeah, you mentioned ESPN. We know that the sports news networks are going to cover it, but what about the news channels? Why were they so invested in this?
There's the whole if it bleeds, it leads mentality, which has never left television. What happens here is you get a big story that's the biggest sports story of the weekend. So like you said, sports news is going to cover it. But then what happens, it sort of seeps into the popular culture. People love to see violence.
Everywhere. That's what it is.
It's ridiculous. And what these networks are going to do is say, okay, you know what? We're going to run that story, and maybe people will tune into us and they'll see what happened. If someone's not going to go over to ESPN, maybe they'll watch ABC News or NBC News to see what happened. It just became a bigger-than-life story.
What about all the local coverage of it?
It's absurd. Last night during Desperate Housewives, and yeah, I was watching, and I'm comfortable
it was good,
to admit that it was.
We'll talk about that later.
But they're doing teasers for local news coverage of the fight coming up later on when that show is over. I mean, this was everywhere. Locally, here in New York or in Florida, wherever you were, it's not a local story, but they made it one because, apparently there's nothing else going on. There's no war. There's nothing else important, so we may as well cover this, right?
We saw there in the intro Tommy Bowden, the coach of Clemson, blaming the brawl with South Carolina on his players watching this. What do you think of that?
Is that about the most absurd thing you've ever heard? It's ridiculous. That itself makes me angrier, I think, than our... It's ridiculous. I mean, if his players, they watched Extreme Makeover, they're going to join Habitat for Humanity? I don't think so. I don't like the idea of blaming something that happens on TV on actions of grown men. These are college football players, and they're blaming it on television. That's absurd.
So what is TV's responsibility in this case?
Well, I think to start out, TV needs to show it because it was a big sports story. But it gets to a point where if you're not going to have analysis, if you're not going to explain how it affects culture, how it affects the game, how it affects the larger issue, are kids being scarred at home by seeing it on TV? If you're not going to talk about that, then it's ridiculous just to air it as a bloody little teaser.
I guess everybody's talking about it everywhere. What does this do for NBA ratings?
Well, when these guys come and play again on Christmas, that's going to be a big deal.
Yeah, what about that? What about the Christmas matchup?
I hate to say it, but you're going to hear Let's Get Ready to Rumble or some kind of promo like that
for this game. Even though half the players aren't going to probably be playing that day, it really is going to be the focus, for the next month at least, on what's going to happen in the NBA. You've got Kobe and Shaq, but what they'll probably even do is sort of promo that as a fight that's coming up.
Yeah,
that's
the Kobe Shaq, who cares about that now?
Yeah, exactly. Nobody wants to see that, but that's how they're going to promote it. And I don't think for regular NBA ratings it'll help, but I think for that game, people are going to tune back in.
You think there's going to be any negative backlash, people not wanting to watch because of this?
I definitely think so. I really do. I mean, I myself really do feel kind of upset. So, you know, do I really need to tune into the NBA to see a hockey game? I don't think so. This really was what happens. I think a lot of parents are telling their kids, you know, this really isn't what happens in a sport, but you know what? I don't want you watching it. I know coaches have told their teams, do not watch the NBA. This isn't really a role model for you.
As we play it over and over this morning. All right, Eric Fowle, thanks so much for coming in. Great to see you. We'd like to know what you think about the storming of the Palace, so log on TV and take our poll. Now it's time to go on the road.
The Ford 400, his wheel broke and sent one of his tires sailing, but Kurt Busch overcame that and dealt with some other speed bumps en route to a 5th place finish in the race. And that was just good enough for him to claim his first NASCAR championship, winning the Nextel Chase for the Cup by just 8 points, one of the closest margins ever. Were it not for the new format, Busch wouldn't even have been in contention. With us now in this week's On the Road from Miami, the motorsports writer who covered the race for the Miami Herald, Cami Clark. Good morning, Cami.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well, thank you. How do you think NASCAR's new point system affected the outcome of Sunday's race?
Oh, greatly. Kurt Busch wouldn't have even been in the running for the championship if they hadn't had the new 10-race chase for the championship. And when it started, he won the first race and kind of got on a roll, and everybody was kind of chasing him ever since. So the new format worked exactly how it wanted. They had 5 guys in contention at the very end, and it turned out to be a great race when the champion was decided on the last lap.
When they announced these changes, of course, a lot of the drivers were against it, but the purpose of the changes was to increase the excitement for the fans. How successful, now looking back at the season, how successful do you think the changes have been?
Oh, tremendously. I know all the drivers, they absolutely hated it when they first heard about it. I think Matt Kenseth said it was worse than he thought. I think Michael Waltrip's the only one that liked it, but as the chase got going and they got building momentum and all the excitement around it, that they started liking it more and more. And as it turned out, there were 5 drivers, like I said, on the very last lap coming down to make a decision, whereas last year it was decided before the final race, very anticlimactic. And this year it's just very exciting, and the fans got into it to the very end.
And of course they were probably all stunned. Busch lost a tire. How do you think that altered the race?
Well, it altered it huge because he's coming around to pit road. If the tire ends up going on pit road, there's no caution, and he's probably going to lose a lap. But because the tire ended up going and rolling down the track, they had to throw out a caution, so all the cars had to slow down, and that allowed Kurt Busch's crew a chance to change the tire very, very quickly, and so he was able to continue on the lead lap and be able to catch up. I think he would have lost the championship if that tire did not roll onto pit road.
The race then went into overtime. How do you think that affected the win?
Well, a couple guys ran out of gas. Dale Jarrett ran out of gas. Tony Stewart had a little problem because it went 4 extra laps, and they kind of gauged their gas almost down to the very last lap. So it didn't affect the championship at all, but it did affect a couple of the other guys that had a chance at winning it.
Now, Busch is the new champion. He, of course, has had a bad boy image for a while, and he's been trying to change that. He's been being a good boy this season. How do you think actually winning the championship is going to affect that image?
I think he's hoping it's going to give him respect back. He's the first to admit that he really earned a bad reputation at the beginning. He drove extra aggressively, wrinkled a lot of feathers, made a lot of enemies, got all the fans turned against him. I mean, he gets booed religiously at every track he goes to. So he's really been on his best behavior this year, and he's really trying to elevate his status. And I think he's hoping that being the champion, that he's going to portray himself. I know his funny quote last night was that I'm not such a bad guy, and that's what he's hoping that people will see in him.
He's certainly grown up a lot in the past 4 years. What do you think we can expect to see next season, Cami?
It's going to be an interesting, because Mark Martin is going to be retiring, and he's made. I know he's going for it. He'd really love to go out with a championship. Jimmy Johnson has finished runner-up twice. He'd love to do it. There's new kids coming in with Carl Edwards, and some of the rookies are going to get better. Casey Kane looking for his first win. So there's a lot of exciting things, and see even if Kurt Busch can repeat. So there's a lot of things coming up next year, and the new format, people are used to it, so I think it's going to be even better next season.
Cammie, thanks for joining us. We'll be waiting for the start of next season.
Okay, thank you so much.
That gets going underway on February the 12th with the Budweiser Shootout, followed by Daytona 500 just a few days later. Coming up, it took him 10 weeks, but Eli Manning finally got to start an NFL game. He didn't win, but was he a lost cause? Woody and Skip will return to debate.
On the Road is brought to you by Geico. A 15-minute call could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Couple of minutes before the top of the hour. Welcome back to Cold Pizza. What are you doing?
I'm riding a horse. I'm from the West.
You're making me dizzy. We continue with our look at First and 10. It's your first look at the 10 biggest stories in sports. We've reached second down with 7 topics to go. We're going to step away from the Pacers and the Pistons for a few minutes.
No.
Yeah, I know. Hard to believe, but we're going to do that. We're going to start with a much-awaited debut. Of course, we're talking about Eli Manning. He got his first NFL start yesterday, the #1 overall pick. Took over the quarterbacking duties for the Giants against the Falcons. Effective, but not spectacular. That's his first touchdown pass in the NFL. Third quarter, 6-yarder to Jeremy Shockey. It wasn't enough, though. His Giants lose by a final count of 14-10. Skip, we'll start with you.
Of course.
Your impression.
Well, it's my first time to get to
yes,
today.
You've been going most of the time today.
I think so.
Your impressions of Eli Manning.
I love this kid, and I love the poise he displayed early on when Shockey and Toomer dropped everything but their drawers when he threw them passes that hit them right in their hands. Here we go. Here's a drop from our man. This kid is very special. Thank you very much. Way to go, Shockey.
That was a big hit, though, over the middle.
But he dropped 4 or 5.
Yeah, he did have a lot of drops.
And, Jay, what I loved about the end of this game was that he didn't pull the game out because we know how New York loves to eat its young. If he pulls that game out, all of a sudden we're talking about Joe Willie Manning, you know, King Eli, and he would never be able to live up to the expectations. I thought he accounted himself so well yesterday, and then it was fine that they didn't pull it out at the end.
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought he was steady, not spectacular. I enjoyed watching him. One of the things about living in New York is we get to watch the Jets and the Giants every week. But I've liked him all along. I think the Giants are going to be very happy with him. And he can handle New York. Joe Willie Manning, I like that. He will handle the pressure. Here's a guy who's grown up living under the shadow of his dad and his brother. He understands it. He will do well. He had all the pressure going to Ole Miss, all the stuff that happened, not signing with the Chargers. This kid's got his head on straight, and yesterday you could tell he was in
And if he had started the first exhibition game forward, the Giants would be a playoff team
But Tom Coughlin is one of the worst coaches in the world. People are going to figure that out.
Well, I was waiting for you to get your Coughlin dig in. Yeah. One thing that was apparent as the game went on, you could see his confidence grow, and he has all the makings of a future star in this league. From the NFL now to the college game, the Auburn Tigers had a bit more of a test on Saturday in the Iron Bowl against their arch rival Alabama than they expected. Third quarter, Auburn leading 7-6. Jason Campbell hits Courtney Taylor on the 32-yard touchdown pass. That would give Auburn a 14-6 lead. They'd go on to win 21-13, perhaps a little too close to comfort, but when you consider the fact that when these two teams play, anything can happen.
Wait, then they expected, or you guys said it was going to be a blowout?
I think I didn't say it was going to be a blowout.
Yeah, he did.
I think he did say it was going to be a blowout. I thought that they would win a little more easily than they did. 8-point margin of victory was closer than I thought.
Your guy Orton finally had another game after about 6 weeks.
After he was hurt for 3 weeks.
Back on task, gentlemen.
He was going to win the Heisman Trophy going away.
And the #1 draft pick in the NFL.
Which he still may be.
Okay. Let's get down to the brass tacks here. If you guys were in charge, and thankfully you're not, of putting two teams, do you put there, and then I'll ask the question to you, Skip.
You know, I'm not a research expert like he is, but I spent some time examining the schedules and trying to figure out, because everybody talks about Auburn's lack of playing the Citadel and a couple of schools from Louisiana you've never heard of, but look at Southern Cal's non-conference schedule. They played a team in Colorado State that just was blown out by Air Force. BYU's not any good this year. They had a bad non-conference schedule. I think people are rewarding them for what happened last year.
Last week.
And I think, again, if you look at 5 quality teams on Auburn's schedule from the Southeastern Conference, and you look at 4 or 5 quality teams on Oklahoma's schedule, I still think they belong in the national championship game, given our circumstances. What's going to end up happening? Oklahoma's going to beat a bad Nebraska or Colorado team in the Big 8, Big 12 conference. And then they're also going to beat, in the Southeastern Conference, Auburn might be tested by Tennessee.
I think they will
and Southern Cal is just going to sit there. I would like to see them at least tested by Notre Dame and UCLA, but it's probably not going to happen.
Well, sadly, I think all 3 belong in this. I'm not trying to cop out on this, but Utah.
Yeah, but you say Auburn, Oklahoma, right?
Well, yes.
Well, I'm going to pin you down. If you had to pick 2.
If I had to right now, I'd have to stick with USC Oklahoma just because I can't help it. Both of them have done nothing to show me that they don't deserve to be in that game. Auburn in the 3rd and 4th quarters was impressive the other day, and it was 21-13, but I can't say they're better than USC or Oklahoma. And Oklahoma's defense has come back around with the addition, and they've gotten Antonio Perkins back and got the best offense in the country and a pretty good defense. I don't know. I'm sticking with USC.
Either way it works out, it's safe to say that it's going to be determined by votes, and that's the wrong way to determine a champion in any sport. From the race shuffle, another week, another huge game for Adrian Peterson. Running back went for 240 yards and 3 touchdowns Saturday against Baylor. Skip, did he cement the Heisman this weekend?
Absolutely not. And I don't know how we can say another week, another huge game.
He had 240 yards, 3 touchdowns?
But 2 weeks ago, he had a rough game against Texas A&M, and he dislocated his shoulders, I keep pointing out. And against Nebraska, he could barely carry the football. I was shocked he could carry it this time. Baylor is awful. Jason White is still the front runner for the Heisman.
Okay.
6
I
games.
thought you were going to say Orton.
No, last 6 games, Jason White, 21 touchdowns, 1 interception. I don't see how you can't say he's the front runner.
Well, here are 2 things, and I'll make this very quick. They're going to split. They're going to split the votes. That's what could cost one of them the Heisman Trophy is Peterson. And there are a lot of people like me and you that are going Peterson, White, Peterson, White. I asked one question of myself earlier this morning. I said, could Oklahoma have won those games without Peterson? Could they have won them without White? The answer to that question is they couldn't have won them without White.
I agree.
So I am with White and with you on that. I would pick and will pick Jason White because they couldn't have won all their games without him.
And I think the voters finally had an excuse not to vote for a freshman with the last 2 games.
Yeah, I think Peterson has a chance to win it 3 years in a row. He could beat Peterson.
If he sticks around. Well, Archie Griffin may
He has
have
to
company
stick around,
very
Jay.
soon.
He has no choice.
Not all four.
Not all four.
That's it for Second Down. Woody and Skip will return in moments.
This is a good look today.
You like that?
Yeah.
I'm glad I get your seal of approval. That's very rare that I get that
you're
from
absolutely
you.
right.
They're going to have much more on the Pacers
dress in the dark.
and the Pistons. I don't pick it. I just wear it. Like how stays totally secure, or is there concern? Should alcohol be banned entirely? We'll ask and get some answers when Cold Pizza comes right back.
The fallout from the Pacers-Pistons riot at the Palace in Auburn Hills continues this morning. We'll have a report from Indiana on how the Pacers will piece their season back together in the wake of 4 suspensions. And a panel of experts in New York, led by ex-NBA star Charles and fans. The Pacers will piece their season back together in the wake of 4 suspensions. And a panel of experts in New York, led by ex-NBA star Charles Smith, discuss what's next for the NBA's players and fans. And we want your views on the storming of the Palace at coldpizza.tv on this special edition of Cold Pizza. The fallout from the Pacers-Pistons riot at the Palace in Auburn Hills continues this morning. We'll have a report from Indiana on how the Pacers will piece their season back together in the wake of 4 suspensions. And a panel of experts in New York, led by ex-NBA star Charles Smith, discuss what's next for the NBA's players and fans. And we want your views on the storming of the Palace at coldpizza.tv on this special edition of Cold Pizza.
And welcome back to Cold Pizza for part 2. I'm Kit Hoover.
And I'm Thea Andrews. Jay Crawford, Skip Bayless, and Woody Page are going to be here in a moment with First and 10. We've got plenty more of the storming of the Palace, believe it or not. It's shocking that we'd have more on that. Former NBA player Charles Smith heads up our panel of experts discussing fallout both on and off the court. Also, the Pacers are left a little short-handed after the suspensions, and we're going to talk about what Indiana can do without some of their best players.
And Thea, the ugliness weekend spilled out onto the football field with Clemson and South Carolina. We're going to talk everything college football. We're also going to talk with one of the best high school hoop players in the country, Greg Oden from Indianapolis, Indiana. He's good. He got some skills.
All that and more right here in part 2 of Cold Pizza. Now it's time for First
Skills
and
with
10.
a Z.
And welcome back to First and 10. Woody Page and Skip Bayless. And we've run through 6 topics already. We have 4 to go. 3rd and 4. The magic of 3rd and 4. First and 10. I guess we're gonna stay at first and 10. There we go. 3rd and 4. And we head back to the topic that has so dominated our morning, and really news coverage everywhere you look. Pacers-Pistons fight from Friday. Are you with me? You ready to go, Woody?
Pages of the New York Times. You know it's got to be a big story.
Yeah, and absolutely. And a lot of the questions that have been raised all over ESPN and other media outlets since Friday is safety at sporting events. Clearly, the security at the Palace of Auburn Hills was insufficient. One of the questions we asked on our website is, do you feel safe at sporting events these days? And the results are in. 79% of you said yes, you do. But I guess you can focus in on the 21% of those that responded say they do not feel safe. Skip, I'll ask you. Do you feel completely safe when you go to a sporting event?
I'm very surprised at our poll because...
Surprised which way?
I don't feel safe. And again, I think Woody would be the same way. I rarely go to a game when I don't sit in the confines of the press box. But to me, Woody, as you brought out in the earlier in the show, way too much alcohol sold, and way too many macho men in the stands trying to act out their athletic frustrations by looking for a fight or screaming profanity at the field.
Yep. There is a lot of that. How do you police that, Woody? We were at the World Series together, and we saw fans yelling things to players that you wouldn't want your kids sitting next to them to hear.
Yeah. First of all, I think that you have to do a better job with security. And people say, well, that's a very easy answer. Go to a game. Who are the security people? They're either retired people or they're very young people. And that's not a put down of either group, but they're just hired to be there in a blazer or to be there in a jacket that says security on the background. I think, and it's come to this, you've got to have trained personnel, off-duty police officers, or at least security people hired by an agency where they're trained and they keep an eye on who's sitting in the seats.
I think the
NFL go up
does
to them,
that.
They re-emphasize, the first time you do it, zero tolerance.
Absolutely.
You come up, you throw something, you're caught, you're out of here. I have been at games, and this is pretty typical, where they have cameras trained on all of the seating in the arena. They should be able to hone in, pick out who's doing it, because we mentioned at the top of the show, the guy that Artest went after was not the right guy. It was the guy, if you look at the tape, it was the guy who actually tried to intervene. Oh, yeah, I'm here as a peacemaker. He's the guy who threw the cups. I think you should have zero tolerance. You're out of here. We don't care what. You want your 385 back?
But the irony is...
What about alcohol? Because you touched on it earlier. These leagues take a great deal of money from beer manufacturers in sales and in sponsorships. Do you limit it? Do you cut it out altogether?
Well, you're asking the wrong guy. I would just say absolutely no more alcohol because you can show and bad things happen, which is why we have so many bar incidents. We want to cut it out, but obviously the owners will argue, well, look at the salaries we have to pay and look at the money and the income we get from our beer sales.
How realistic is that, though? Because these leagues take a great deal of money from these beer makers.
Well, again, the NBA games used to be the one safe place to. That would be the one game I'd want to go to where beer wasn't as prevalent or didn't incite riots the way it can at baseball and football.
I do have two suggestions. One, and I mentioned at the outset, there shouldn't be a place where you can go drink unlimited amounts of alcohol just because you paid $3.85 for a ticket and go into some room before a game. Secondly, you should have an armband. And they do this in a lot of games when they check for to make sure you're either 18 or 21, depending on why not allow, instead of people being able to buy 2 beers, which is what it is, people buy 2 beers. They go back and buy 2 beers. Have a checkpoint where you can have maybe a total of 5 beers during the game. 1 a quarter or something like that.
Way too much.
And you pop a thing. Well, I'm just saying, pick a number, wherever it may be, 3, and that's controlled. So.
All right. Next up, the response by the NBA Players Association. Executive Director Billy Hunter called the suspensions, quote, egregious and will appeal the harshest penalties. Skip, should Players Association even fight this?
Absolutely, they should fight it because the commissioner right now is just playing to the crowd. He's telling people what they want to hear because they're so shocked and amazed by the video we've seen until our stomachs turn. But seriously, step back from it. Did Ron Artest throw haymakers when he went into the stands? No. Should he have gone in? Absolutely not. That was the very first mistake made. Steven Jackson rushes to his aid because it looks like he's in trouble in the stands. Should he be suspended for 30 games? It's way too harsh. And Jermaine O'Neal took a flying leap and delivered a who, for all he knew, was about to jump on Ron Artest again.
What was Artest doing in the stands?
Well, again, he thought somebody hit him.
Why
with
was
the
he
field.
in the stands?
Well, he shouldn't have gone. I said that was the first
doing
mistake.
In the stands. He should be suspended for a year. You've got to prove something to the players. And I say this again, he's a man who really needs psychological help. But any player that goes into the stands gets what he deserves in terms of suspension.
Well, I agree
any
with
fan
you.
that comes onto the field to play.
Let me ask you this, Woody. Is there
in
anything
Mexico
a
City.
fan can do to a player that would excuse a player from going after
No,
him? Because you're almost
points him
giving them
out.
now an unlimited
You've got
license to do whatever they
No,
want.
you've got to turn the other cheek. If you were a player, there's no reason for you. You stop and you get security people and you say, that's the guy who did it, or you walk off the court, your team refuses to play the game. There are all sorts of other outlets than to just respond with violence. There's no reason for it. You walk away, you figure out a way to deal with it, but that's not the way. Does it come to Mexico City? If you've been to the stadium down there where they have a moat around the stadium, they have barbed wire fence around the soccer field.
But I thought the fans'
I think
reaction...
there should be commissions to sit down and study how this crap doesn't continue to happen in sports.
But the fans' reaction was at least as revolting in this case as the Pacers' reaction. To me, they were completely out of control.
Yeah, I think there's equal outrage from towards the fans, towards the players. I do sense that perhaps more folks are coming down on Woody's side, saying it's absolutely inexcusable what the player did in response.
Because deep down, most fans have a love-hate with players. They hate how much money they make, so they want to see these guys suspended for a year.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Next up, fallout from the Detroit. At least some think so. Saturday in Clemson, South Carolina, the in-state rivalry between South Carolina and Clemson, it turned ugly. Late in the fourth quarter, a number of players from both teams squared off on the field. It took 10 minutes and South Carolina State troopers to help break this thing up. After the game, Clemson coach Tommy Bowden said that the Pacers-Pistons brawl played a part in this fight. Listen.
For 24 hours, they've watched that basketball fiasco on TV. That's all they've watched. I mean, that's on 24 hours a day. Every major news program, that thing was covered, and they've sat there and watched it. There's an era right now going on in sports, and again, I think last night was an example of what happened. Oh, yeah, it's discussed. It was the very last thing said coming out of the dressing room by me.
Skip, is that a bit of a cop-out, saying that the fight in Indianapolis had anything to do with this?
I do think it had something to do with
do?
this. They did watch their heroes, and don't think these aren't their heroes. All Friday night, they did watch Joey Porter duke it out the week before the Cleveland-Pittsburgh game with William Green, and it does jack them up. It does send them over the edge when something happens in a very heated interstate rivalry between Clemson and South Carolina.
Yeah, idiots see, idiots do. You're absolutely right. They copy the players that they consider idols. That's why we see the touchdown dances. That's why we see what happens after a sack. That's why we see that if a brawl breaks out in an NBA game, they think it's acceptable behavior. Coaches, again, have to take responsibility for saying to their players, you get involved in a fight, you're suspended for 2 or 3 games.
And what was scary here, Woody, is that they defied the troopers. And we just saw the kid from South Carolina run away and threw a trooper to get to a Clemson player in the end zone and continue to fight. So they are openly defying authority that was on the field. In Detroit, I couldn't see a security guy. I couldn't see anybody. It's like they had 4 Barney Fives sitting up in the lobby asleep. I don't know where they were, but they had people here.
I have heard from a lot of young kids who are mimicking what you do on TV, and that's just scarier to me than anything else.
Well, they're mimicking your hair is what I think they're mimicking. Right?
I'm just impressed with the Barney Fife reference. Yeah, Don Knotts is on the phone. He'd like to talk to you. Last topic, the Packers continue to play lights out. Brett Favre brought his team into Houston to face the Texans last night. Once again, he worked his comeback magic. We've seen it so many times in his brilliant career. Score tied at 13 with time winding down. Favre went 6 for 7 to lead Green Bay into field goal range. With time running out, Ryan Longwell steps up and just sneaks that 46-yarder through. Packers win their 5th in a row, 16-13. Skip, what impressed you most from this NFL Sunday?
What you just saw. I'm going first here. I'm getting to catch up, finally.
I can talk to myself.
All right, you can talk to yourself. I'm going to talk to Jay for a second.
He's having his own show over there.
We've seen Brett Favre do a lot of amazing things, and Brett Favre sometimes turns into a caricature of himself and tries way too much and makes some really goofy attempts that turn into interceptions, and he threw a couple last night. But I got to tell you, the rainbow he threw to Donald Driver, as impressive as anything I've seen all year, and then he throws a rope to Donald Driver to set up a 47-yard field goal as Green Bay wins its 5th straight game. They were down 13-3 early in the fourth quarter, Woody. That was an amazing comeback, and this guy's had a few in his time.
Well, here I think, watching the game last night, that the Packers are very much alive for the Super Bowl. And there was, I can't take credit for this, there was an interview with him that suggested that he, despite all the problems he's had, father dying, his wife has breast cancer, that he is going to have fun this year and try and make it his last year and try and go out still, Super Bowl or bust. And it looked to me like last night he was a guy who was alive and alert. I put them as one of the key teams to be in the Super Bowl. I like the Falcons and the Eagles, 3 in the NFC, and I think those are sincere choices for the Super Bowl. 4 in the AFC, Steelers, Patriots, Colts, and I think the Broncos got back into it with a very impressive victory in New Orleans last year. So those are my 7 to watch for the Super Bowl the rest of the year.
And I think we are going to see the team on display tonight on Monday Night Football, and I speak of the New England Patriots, who are still head and shoulder pads, I think, above.
Still the heavyweight champ.
Giving the Steelers
I'm not giving them any respect yet.
All right, that'll do it for a spirited 1st and 10. Woody and Skip will return a little later. They'll do that to kick their extra points. Go talk to yourself. Have a good time. Up next, Ron Artest has had his fair share of run-ins around the NBA. Should we have seen something like Friday coming? We'll break down Friday night's madness completely when we return.
Charles, could you please?
1, 2, 3, ABC. 1, 2, 3, ABC. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4.
And while he handed out the harshest penalties in NBA history, Commissioner David Stern said his league needs to, quote, redefine the bounds of acceptable behavior for fans, end quote. So how do you feel about that? One of the questions that we asked on our website is if you agree with the length of Ron Artest suspensions. And, of course, we have the results. We just flashed them, I believe. Now to talk about the ramifications of the ugly incident on the basketball courts, in the legal courts, and in the court of public opinion, we bring in Cold Pizza NBA analyst and former player Charles Smith. Charles, good to have you in again.
Thank you, Jay.
Court TV's James Curtis is also with us this morning, as is MISL Commissioner Steve Ryan and sports psychologist Joel Fish. They make up our panel, and here they are. Charles, we'll start by getting your initial reaction when you see the images from Friday night.
Well, I was shocked and appalled from the images, but immediately, you know, from my perspective, I come from different views. One, I served in a union as somewhat of an administrative role. I understand because I take my kids to the games. I am a season ticket holder and a fan and a former player. So there was a lot that went through my mind at initially seeing that event.
Steve, you understand David Stern's job as a league commissioner. What do you think of his punishments?
I think it's very appropriate. I also think that it was inexcusable in terms of the player misconduct, but I think there's a dimension here in terms of fans that's very serious, and it's an issue that not only the NBA is going to look at, but I think all of professional sports will take a very close look at as a result.
And in professional sports, we've seen it in baseball, the NBA. Why is this happening more?
Well, it's not just the professional sports. You go to any Little League game or soccer game, and fans are crossing the line more than ever before.
Why is that now more
Taunting,
than ever?
because I think the pressures to win are so much more. I think the status of being on a winning team has really been elevated. I mean, I really understand how pro athletes are supposed to be able to handle abuse, but anyone that's been to a game, even a Little League game, hears things said about your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, and fan behavior really does have to be looked at as part of the response to this whole situation.
Clearly, there is a breaking point that I think all players will tell you they have. Charles, as a player, I'm sure you heard your share of insults and nasty language from fans. How did you deal with it?
Well, it's a very tough situation to deal with, out in public or on the court field or what have you. The problem is your tolerance. Tolerance is a negative aspect in the first place, just to say the word tolerance, but it's very difficult. You have to look at the situation. A lot of players today have to really look at protecting their assets, their money, their reputation, and those sorts of things. And it's a tough position to be in when you're with your children and in other situations. And to compound what Joel has said, over a 10-year period, fans have gotten more and more control over the situation in sports, mainly because over the last 10 years in all the sports, you've heard the players' salaries, the season tickets have grown because of player salaries. And that's far from the truth. But if I'm a fan and I'm hearing that for 10 years in all of sports, I'm taking some ownership and saying, I'm paying these guys salaries, I can say what I want to say.
You know, there's an interesting aspect as well, and the assets that the players have to protect, and the idea that there's certainly conflicting messages at the very least with respect to what is in the best interest of a player's reputation. Is it to be seen as the tough guy who will not take anything from fans or from fellow players? Does that enhance the credibility? We can only harken back to just, what, a week or two ago when Kobe Bryant was in the news, and the reports surrounding the incident had to do with, will his street cred go up because now that good guy untarnished image is gone away. Those conflicting images that would rein in behavior are also an issue.
Yeah. Let's turn to the legal ramifications, James, because clearly there will be many from this incident. Take us through them. What will we see now?
Well, you've got basically three areas to discuss. You've got the player-on-player, which happened on the floor. You've got the fan-on-player in the stands. And then you've got the fan-on-player on the floor. Now, the player-on-player, the commissioner has dealt with substantially. Some may take issue with how it was dealt with and the appropriateness, but it was dealt with, and that sort of contest and conflict happens often. It's not anything unusual.
So no real legal ramifications from that?
No real legal ramifications outside of the administrative steps that were taken by the commissioner. However, when you get the players in the stands with the fans, that is now the province of the prosecutor, of the police. You are likely to see lawsuits, criminal prosecutions stemming from that conduct against at least the first two players who went into the stands. When the players now come onto the floor, when the fans now come onto the floor, it's a bit of a gray area. That is the province, obviously, of the players. Whether or not a player is right in defending himself or perceiving a threat, not involved in an altercation, is going to be another issue.
Well, from that perspective, when you're playing out on the court, there's that invisible field that we deal with. I'm in total agreement of everything that's been said to this point about players not going into the stands.
Right.
But
that's your office, though, the court.
Once you come onto the court, that's our domain. And what happens on the court happens on the court. That is supposed to be the property of the organizations and everyone involved. When you look at the collective bargaining or the uniform player contract, the player's name is actually mentioned with the backboard and everything else. So it's you're a property of the league. So if someone damaged the goal post or anything else, that's the property of the league.
But the problem is that barrier had collapsed by the time the melee had ensued. So now what you have to look at is the individual conduct of the fan versus the player. Was the fan coming at the player in such a way that that player would reasonably believe that he was going to be subject to some harm? Or was it simply an antagonistic act from the player being frustrated?
There are a whole series of legal complications with this, but I think if you step back and look at the NBA, who has really worked hard to build the NBA brand, done a great job, with a great success now over in China, and it really is a stain on the NBA, temporarily, I might add. And it requires, I think, a real rededication of everyone, all the constituencies, the players, the coaches, security in the building, in the arenas needs to be looked at, as David Stern said.
Is it the league's responsibility to educate the players a little more than they have in the past? And maybe you can speak to this too, Charles. I don't know what kind of training the players currently get about interaction with the fans, but does the league have more of a responsibility to try to curb these things before they happen?
The league has done a tremendous job over the last 10 years with implementing various rules and programs for rookies coming into the league. Right. But I think where the failures happen is over a period of time you have to deal with veterans. We've gone through a situation with Dennis Rodman. So from that, there is no progressional programs put in place for any type of behavior of this magnitude. So I think that's where there's a flaw. And with the league being a global platform where all these videos and everything being done will be seen worldwide, you need a worldwide perspective for a solution in this situation. You need former players. You need people who understand cultural differences, because this is a broad view that needs to be addressed that way.
And although there's a broad view, just real quick, The bottom line is there's no difference between a player and a fan when it comes to hitting somebody in self-defense. The same rules are going to apply.
Doctor, is there a cultural difference between player and fan that's causing a problem
Well,
here?
I think if you look internationally, there's incidents all over the world where people have been shot over these kinds of things. Just to add to what Charles was saying, unless we really address fan behavior here, I think we're missing a big part of it. I think there's an attitude, and it goes through college where you hear chants that you never heard before, high school chants you never heard before. Just because I pay my $5, $10, $50, $100 doesn't give me free license to say or do whatever I want.
It's worse now than ever, you allege. How do you police that, though? How do you keep the fans from being fans?
Well, first of all, I think the NBA did a very good thing by having swift and serious consequences. But I think there has to be a dialogue in game management, number one, but throughout sports about where is that line that a fan can't cross? And what's behavior that crosses the line? It's a sportsmanship issue, it's a fair play issue, but it's a legal issue also.
And that line has to be very, very bright, and it has to be very clear to everybody.
Steve, is it possible that you have a system in place where the fan actually polices themselves, and if you hear something as a fan that crosses the line, usher, or how much of that should we expect realistically
I think
to happen?
you can expect some of that, particularly in a family environment. But I think we're into the big issue here, which is the fan behavior. And when you look at what's happened in baseball in terms of fans coming on the baseball field and attacking coaches, it's an issue that the NBA identified, and they're going to take steps on immediately to understand better. Security is a very critical ingredient, particularly in a basketball situation, because fans they're very close and they have access to the court.
Yeah. And the other thing about the fan situation, you know, alcohol does play a role in this, and it plays a role in society with sports. Yeah. And in most arenas, toward the end of the games, the fans that are sitting around courtside and arena level, they tend to leave because it gets a little rowdy down the stretch. It's those from the upper stands that might have been drinking excessively that start to come down, and that's what happened in Detroit. So even with my situation, if I'm at a game with my children, I'm going to leave in the last 2 minutes, and then they're saying, Dad, why are we leaving? And I just say, well, listen to it in the car. Because, you know.
And that brings in the issue of now legally what the responsibility of the club, the Pacers, the Pistons, the arena itself, the NBA, what their legal responsibility is. Will they be civilly sued? Probably. Will there be criminal ramifications? Probably not. But those are the other issues that are going to play into this as well.
Well, guys, I'd love to keep this conversation going. It's been good, to say the least, but we definitely have to move it along. Dr. Joel Fish, Steve Ryan, James Curtis, and Charles Smith, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it. We at Cold Pizza would like to know what you think. Log on to coldpizza.tv and tell us, with the suspensions, the Pacers are clearly short-handed, and now that's their task to try to... See ya.
Thank you, Jay. The Pacers are in first place. Indiana had only 6 players available for Saturday's 86-83 loss to Orlando following the suspensions from the storming of the Palace. So, what can the club do to replace its stars? To talk about it, we welcome in from Connecticut, former Knicks president and CEO of Madison Square Garden, Dave Checketts. Good morning, Dave.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, thank you. And in Indianapolis, Pacers beat writer for the Indianapolis Star, Sekou Smith. Good morning, Sekou. How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Dave, I'm going to start with you. We've obviously spoken a lot this morning about the league and what they can do to prevent this from happening again. But now the Pacers are facing a problem. What can Pacers management do to save their season and improve their roster?
Well, the Pacers have a terrific management team. Larry Bird, Rick Carlisle, Donnie Walsh. These gentlemen have got to treat this now like a season-ending injury on the part of their top 3 scorers and all-stars, 2 of them all-stars. They've got to scour the waiver wire. They've got to look at all of their young draft picks. They've got to even look at minor leagues and see if there aren't young players who pulled into their system with a terrific coach might grow and develop and actually salvage their season. But they can't throw in the towel because that's not fair to the fans. They've got to do everything they can to replace those players.
That's a lot of talent to replace, though. I mean, it's one thing to replace a player, a star player that's been put out by injury, but these are 3 players that have been taken out for disciplinary actions. Sekou, these kinds of players don't grow on trees.
Well, they obviously have to chase down every avenue, and I'm assuming that means overseas, wherever they can find available talent. But I don't think we ought to shortchange the players they have on the team now and the guys they'll have coming back from injuries. within the next 3 weeks. This team is far from dead, and I think anybody who thinks they are is sorely mistaken.
Oh, certainly the return of Reggie Miller will help. Dave, let me ask you, I know when you were with the Knicks, you faced a situation like this when you had to replace Patrick Ewing. How difficult was that, and having gone through that experience, how hard do you think it's going to be for the Pacers?
Well, I think it's going to be very difficult for the Pacers. I'm not underestimating that. These players, this was a team that could contend for the East and maybe the NBA title this year, and losing Artest and O'Neal is just a real blow. But when Patrick went down, we as an organization said, look, a good organization, a great organization finds a way to win. And if you recall what happened that year, we had tremendous contributions from Allen Houston and Latrell Sprewell and others who stepped up to the plate, Larry Johnson, and provided great leadership. And we not only made the playoffs, we made a little noise in the playoffs. And when Patrick came back, we were that much better for it.
Sekou, as you said, you can't underestimate the players they have, and they're now going to have to step up. What players on the Pacers do you think are going to benefit from the chance for added playing time?
Well, I think we saw Fred Jones have a breakout performance Saturday night in their loss to Orlando, and rookie center David Harrison as well, but particularly Fred Jones, who's a talent that's been coming on since the All-Star break last year. This could be his chance to really step to the front and show everybody what type of player he is.
Sekou, I know you're out there in Indianapolis. How do the Pacers fans feel about the Pistons fans who essentially helped to ruin their season?
Well, I think this entire city is outraged as a fan base by what's going on, and certainly they were outraged last night to hear how severe the penalties were for the Pacers player, and then see that Detroit's players didn't receive anything near that. But I've heard suggestions that this, there'll be some kind of reciprocation of the events that went on in Detroit Friday night on Christmas Day here, and I think that's nonsense. This is not that type of place, and I don't think Detroit's that type of place. I think you had an incident where there was just particular fans who took it too far.
Dave, we've been speaking a lot about this morning. What do you think the NBA should do to safeguard its players and its fans?
Well, I think a lot of things have to change, particularly in security in buildings. One of the things we did at Madison Square Garden was we had security put in every particular section. And when a fan gets out of control, when he stands, when he yells something inappropriate, he or she, they've got to get a warning. And then if they do it again, they've got to be removed from the building. And alcohol certainly should be cut off earlier than perhaps it was in Detroit. But these fans are everywhere. Let's make no mistake. One of the places where I used to take the most abuse was Indiana during those Knick Indiana series of the late 90s. And so these fans are everywhere. And if you let them have enough freedom to yell what they want, they soon begin to believe that the rules don't apply to them. Alcohol makes them think that they can do whatever they want. That freedom has got to be policed and taken away earlier for these kind of incidents not to happen in the future.
Well, Dave Checketts, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Also to you, Sekou Smith. We'll be continuing to follow this throughout the day and the week. Up next, some fireworks for Lou Holtz's final regular season game at South Carolina. The other brawl between Clemson and South Carolina. But first, more poll results. Our last question, will the events of Friday night's fan brawl in Detroit during the Pacers-Pistons game stop you from attending an NBA game? Here are the results.
The College Football Report, brought
everything else out. Oh, did you really? I think you guys did a feature on Kyle Maynard, who was a wrestler from Atlanta. Was born. Hey guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3.
You know what? He doesn't feel sorry for me. I mean, he's just like,
No.
you know?
Professional.
The College Football Report, brought to you by Singular Wireless.
In the world of sports wasn't limited to the storming of the Palace. A day later, there was a mass brawl late in Clemson's 29-7 win over South Carolina, with Gamecocks coach Lou Holtz caught in the middle in his final regular season game. Not a great way for him to go out. And to talk about a rivalry that got out of hand and marred a day of college football, we say good morning to Cold Pizza analyst and New York Post writer Len Robbins. Good morning to you, Len.
Good morning, Thea.
Now, Coach Tommy Bowden partially blamed the media and their coverage of the Pistons-Pacers brawl all throughout the weekend for what happened in the Clemson-South Carolina game. How much do you think that had to do with it?
You know, if it had 1% to do with it, I think that's a lot. I think that's a cop-out on Coach Bowden's part. You know, this was rivalry weekend, okay? We had emotions brewing across the country, whether it was Oregon, Oregon State, or Alabama, Auburn, one of the fiercest rivalries in the country. Look, there was no reason for this to happen, and the NCAA, and I mean the colleges, have to go to the NCAA and say, we are going to change our rules, and we're going to make it very, very clear that nothing like this should ever happen again. It was the worst thing I've seen in college football.
Change what rules? What do they do to make that happen?
Well, I think what the colleges have to do is get together and say, look, if you remove your helmet, you're out of that game, maybe you're out of the next game. If you leave the sideline, okay, and you join a fight, you're out of that game, maybe you're out of the next game. If they review the films and they see someone who flagrantly throws a punch, you're out of that game, you're out of the next game. If they really want to get away with it, they can do away with it, just like hockey did away with mass brawls by saying third man in rule.
Yeah, and just as a side note, what a terrible way for Lou Holtz to end his career at the school.
Yeah, I mean, that was awful, and, you know, to see him get in there just shows, you know, the integrity that he has for the sport and the respect that he has for the sport, and you would hope that people involved, whether they be Pistons, Pacers, or, you know, Gamecocks and Tigers, would look at that and say, wow, you know, for a man to go in there at his age and really risk his health, maybe we should think about what we're doing.
Okay, some happier stories this weekend. Utah won big to win a BCS Bowl bid, something that a lot of people didn't think they'd ever see happen. How do you think the Utes stack up against USC, Oklahoma, and Auburn?
Well, first of all, if you're Utah, how does this roll off your lips? Perfect, right? You know, a perfect season. Here's the thing. Utah does not have to play the schedule that Auburn, Oklahoma, Southern Cal plays every week. What they do have to do is play one game now against a BCS caliber opponent. So they're going to have 5 weeks to get ready for whoever it is. Now, whoever it is not going to see and has not seen in offense the likes of Utah. And they have not seen a quarterback like Alex Smith, who on one day can figure out what's wrong with the economy, and then the next day figure out what's wrong with the team's defense and pick them apart. They are going to be a very, very difficult opponent for whoever they play, because what they may lack in speed and size and all those other things, they make up for in scheme.
Len Robbins, very hot on Alex Smith. I think you're repping him on the side. All right, Michigan backed into the Rose Bowl on Wisconsin's loss to Iowa. How do you think that's going to affect the Wolverines as they prep for Cal?
Well, you know, we just talked about the fact that Utah now has 5 weeks to get ready. Well, so does Michigan, okay? So the loss to Ohio State, this is a loss that will stay with them for 360-some-odd days until they can get Ohio State again. I don't think it's going to affect them in terms of how they prepare for Cal. I think the thing that they have to worry about is Cal. Cal is, without question, the best one-loss team in the country, and a team that came within Cal.
Okay, let's talk about your Heisman picks. Adrian Peterson back to his fine form after a couple weeks, of course, trouble with his shoulder. Is he still on?
He's right back at the top of the list. I mean, the guy didn't play the final 11 minutes, still ran for 240 yards and 3 touchdowns. You said he might go for 2,000 yards this season. He's close to 1,700. I think you're repping Adrian Peterson.
And I think you almost owe me dinner. Like that Alex Smith is on the list. And, of course, a tie for Matt Leinart and Jason White. I'm not going to let you get away with that. Next week, you're going to have to make a decision, Len. All right, the top 6 teams in the USA Today ESPN poll remain unchanged. USC is number 1, followed by Oklahoma at 2, Auburn at 3, Cal is 4th, Texas at 5th, and Utah at 6. Georgia moves into 7th, then Louisville, Miami, and undefeated Boise State rounds out the top 10. Now let's go over to Jay.
Thea, thank you very much. If the Indiana Pacers are looking for replacements, they don't have to go much further than their own backyard. Greg Oden is from Lawrence North High School. That's right in Indianapolis, and this kid is the next big thing. He's ready to follow Kevin Garnett, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, and Dwight Howard from high school graduation right to the NBA. There is a difference, though. This kid is drawing a lot of attention, and he is only beginning his junior season in high school. With us from Indianapolis to talk about his hometown Pacers and his own career, Greg Oden. And here in the studio, the publisher of School Sports, David Weiss. David, good to see you this morning.
Good to see you, Jay.
Greg, thanks for stopping by. I'll begin with you in Indianapolis. How hard is it for you to enjoy what's going on in your high school career? You're just a junior, and you're hearing all this talk about, you know, he's the next best thing in the NBA.
It really doesn't bother me that much. I just go to school and play. I'm not really worried about what other people think. I'm just trying to prepare myself for the next level, no matter.
Tell our viewers, how tall are you, how much do you weigh, and how old are you?
I'm 16 years old, 7 feet, and 250 pounds.
That is a little astonishing as we sit here and listen to this. Greg, we're used to seeing high school seniors, not necessarily that big, but we're used to seeing high school seniors go from the NBA, or go from high school right to the NBA. How good is this kid, and could he play in the NBA at 16 years old? Is he that good?
Well, this is speculation, but Greg's the real deal. As you said, 7 feet tall, 250 pounds. He's a monster and a true athlete. In terms of our prediction for Greg, School Sports has had kids on the cover like Amari Stoudemire, LeBron James, Sebastian Telfair, Dwight Howard in the past. They went on to do some pretty good things. We put Greg in that class in terms of talent and skill.
Could he play in the NBA right now?
We believe so.
Yeah.
You can't teach 7 feet, 250. But again, that's speculation.
Yeah.
Let's let him finish high school first.
Greg, when you hear talk like that, how does it make you feel?
It really doesn't bother me. I just smile.
And you have a broad smile, we can see. Let me ask you this. When you think about your future, do you see yourself going from high school directly to the NBA? Should college coaches even take time out of their schedule to come recruit you?
I really don't see myself going to the NBA out of high school because really I don't think I'm physically and mentally ready. So I really would like to go to college, develop myself for that next level.
Very refreshing. Who's your idol, Greg?
I like Tim Duncan, but this year I really like Amari Stoudemire.
A youngster who's had a lot to deal with at a young age, much like yourself. Let me ask you this. Friday night.
Oh, man. It was just something to see. Ron Artest, he tried to restrain himself, but it just kept on coming at him and coming at him. He just finally erupted.
All right, let's put you in that situation. You're playing in a game, a fan throws a cup of beer on you. What do you do?
Me? I'm just going to keep on playing because I got a game that I want to win.
All right, very good answer. David, how much are players influenced by their NBA idols when they watch?
Well, certainly players in high school who aspire to be NBA players look up to them, you know, as a be-all, end-all goal of playing in the NBA. At the same time, what we see special about high school athletics and these players is that they're leaders. They're leaders, and they set the example. And if they're influenced by anyone, maybe they're influenced by their coach and or their parent, and that's who we think should influence these student athletes. And the way Greg conducts himself, many professional athletes can probably learn something from him.
Oh, very good. All right, Greg, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Continued success. I know you're only 16, but keep your head on the right way. We like that so far. And, David, thanks so much for coming in.
My pleasure.
Remember that name, Greg Oden. It's one I'm sure you're going to be hearing a great deal of in the future.
The second edition of School Sports is on newsstands now. Coming up, we'll kick our extra points and talk about Terrell Owens and his latest dance. He unveiled it yesterday against the Redskins. Don't go away.
It's time for the 2004 Capital One Mascot Challenge. It's easy to see why fans love the University of Montana's Monty. This Grizzly uses way more than the bare necessities to get the job done. Vote for your favorite mascot at CapitalOneBowl.com.
Time for our extra points, and today Woody Page starts. Go ahead, Woody.
December 7th, 1941, from my mother's generation. It's her birthday. For young people today, it's September 11th, 2001. I asked 5 or 6 of the young people who work here today, I said, what does November 22nd, 1963 mean to you? And they didn't know. So I'm going to remind you today, there are 3 dates that I think shall live in infamy in the United States. And November 22nd, 1963, when I was a senior in high school, I will always remember being in Miss Tommy's class when we found out that John F. Kennedy was assassinated. I just want you to take a moment and remember the last president that I thought was a great president, a man that was going to offer a vision and a future for those of us that were young. So remember, November 22nd.
Well done.
Good job.
Skip.
Jay, the only real shock that I had watching that brawl the other night was the sight of Jermaine O'Neal at 6'10" and 250 pounds, flying into my picture, delivering what could have been a kill shot to one of the 2 idiot fans who were going at it with Ron Artest. Now, this was shocking to me because it didn't bother me, Jay. It sends a message, I feel like, to fans everywhere that if you come onto the court, this was onto the court, you are fair game. You could get hurt bad. Those players have no idea if you're carrying a gun or a knife, and I believe those players should be allowed to defend themselves by whatever means possible, even Jermaine O'Neal with a flying fist.
One of the things that is striking about what happened Friday night is everyone is focusing on assigning blame. There's plenty of blame to go around. The fans who started it share in it. The players who participated share in the blame. The Pistons and their alcohol policy perhaps need to be reviewed, and their security measures. But one thing is very clear. This incident should not be about blame. It should be about cleaning up the problem. And there is no question that the responsibility for that lands squarely on the NBA. Good luck, because it won't be easy.
Great job.
Oh, thank you.
That was your best one.
More cold pizza right after this.
Kiss begins with K. And Snickers. Snickers handles the hunger of the NFL.
It was a sickening, ugly episode, and as someone who was born and raised in the city of Detroit, watching this whole thing unfold, I was ashamed to call myself a Detroiter after watching that whole episode unfold.
Very strong words. Guys, we'll close it up by asking, did we see too much of this? Did the media overblow this over the weekend and even into this week?
By the way, thank you, Drew, for saying that and not being a homer, because I found the fan reaction to Detroit more revolting than the Pacers' reaction.
Yeah.
Have we seen too much of it?
Yeah.
I think we've gone through a week where we've seen entirely too much of towels being dropped and now fists being dropped. I just think that this is what we now live for rather than what we should be watching, which is the games that
It's reality
played.
TV at its worst. Every time it's on, though, I'm glued to the TV. I've seen it 100 times, and I could watch it 100 more. I know it's terrible.
I was in Toronto all weekend, so all I can talk about is the Grey Cup. I'm sorry, guys.
Much more of it on deck. Here we go.